G'day everyone, welcome to Inside Rugby with Mark. If you haven't been here before, my name is Mark. I'm a retired Kiwi bloke. I'm a huge rugby fan and I'm living here in beautiful Cancun in Mexico. So let's get on with today's show. Welcome back to the channel. If you're a regular viewer, it's always good to have you here, and if you're a first timer, welcome on board. I hope if you enjoy my content you're going to stick around, and the best way to do that, of course, is to hit the subscribe button and become part of the Inside Rugby with Mark global family. Now, the All Blacks left New Zealand yesterday, Thursday, to head to Japan to commence their Northern Tour for 2024. And I don't know about you, but I'm extremely excited about the upcoming autumn international series that's going to be taking place in the UK, in France, and also in Ireland. So it's going to be really, really good with the top 4 teams from the Southern Hemisphere heading up there. But before we get there, we're going to have the All Blacks playing in Japan next weekend. Now, this is an opportunity for head coach Scott Robertson to have a look at his selections. Now, before the All Blacks left New Zealand, they gave a press conference and Scott Robertson talked about the ability to be able to use some fringe players in this particular game against Japan. He also sees Cam Roigard getting a bit of a run, and that's probably to be expected because Roigard, of course, has been out for a long time with injury. He's come back and played a few games for Counties Manukau, but now in the All Black jersey and amongst the All Black squad again, it's going to be important for him to hit the ground running. So I suspect we're going to see Cam Roigard starting this game against Japan, and we'll probably see Cortez Ratama coming off the bench. Now, there's always something exciting about a Japan and All Black clash, and this is going to be no different. We've got Eddie Jones, of course, headlining the Japanese Brave Blossoms. And so far in Eddie's tenure, he's done okay. He got Japan through to the final of this year's Pacific Nations Cup. And that's something I wanted to quickly touch on in this video because I watched the final of the Pacific Nations Cup this year between Fiji and Japan, which was played in Japan. And Fiji put on 40 odd points against this Japanese team, and that gave me a little bit of an insight as to what we can probably expect against the All Blacks. Now, it was close up until half-time. It was 10-all in that game. And then Fiji ran away with it in the second half. And they had an opportunity, in fact, to score a couple of more tries. They had a couple of TMO decisions go against them. So the score could have been well over 50 points in that particular game. But I have to say, Fiji played really, really well in that game. If you've watched my recent video about the number 10s in the Autumn International Series this year, you would have seen I mentioned Caleb Muntz for Fiji. Well, he had an outstanding game in that Pacific Nations Cup final against Japan. But it's based on that performance that I look at this game against the All Blacks. It's going to be a very, very tough encounter for Japan. Now, last time these two teams met, the All Blacks and Japan, was a year ago in Japan. And they had a very, very good game. In fact, they scared the All Blacks, and the All Blacks were only able to just come home in the end and win that game by 38 points to 31. It's the closest game the Japanese have ever had against the All Blacks, and they played incredibly well that day, and they caused a lot of nerves for the All Blacks. Do I see that happening again this time? Well, I'll tell you in a minute or two. But if we look at the last 6 games of both of these teams, one of the statistics is quite interesting, isn't it? And that is the number of losses that both of these teams have had in their last 6 encounters. We can see from the Japanese side that they've lost every game they've played in their last 6, except for the game against Samoa, which they were successful. And on the All Blacks side of the ledger, they've lost 3 of their last 6 games. So Scott Robertson will definitely be wanting to put a good game up against Japan in this particular encounter. Now, the All Blacks and Japan have played 7 times throughout their history, and they've all been exciting encounters, mainly for the fact that the All Blacks have scored a ton of points against Japan. The biggest winning margin, in fact, was 128 points, and in that particular game, the All Blacks put on 145 points against Japan. Are we going to see that next weekend in Tokyo? No, I don't think we are. But we are going to see, I think, a very comprehensive win from the All Blacks. I look at it from this point of view. If Fiji are able to put 40 odd points on against Japan, then I see no reason why the All Blacks can't put on 60 points against this Japanese team. I have been impressed by a couple of these Japanese players that I've been watching of late, and first one is Takikawa, their number 10. He had a very good game in that Pacific Nations Cup final. I thought he was very good in his general kicking play. He ran at the line a couple of times, and he also did some very good offload passes that put other players through the gaps, and one of those players was Riley, the centre for Japan, and he had an outstanding game, scored a brilliant try in that game against the Pacific Nations Cup final against Fiji. So I think besides those players, this Japanese team are not going to be able to hang with the All Blacks, and the reason I say that is because their game plan is not going to match up against this All Black team. And it doesn't matter who Scott Robertson picks in this All Black team, they're going to have too much firepower for the Japanese, both up front in the forwards and also scoring tries out wide. And I think because Japan are going to rely on that running and open, expansive game, they're going to leave themselves very open and vulnerable around the forward area. And I would suspect that the All Black forwards are going to have a field day against this Japanese team. And with Japan having one-dimensional aspect to their game against the All Blacks, which is going to be running the ball, I think the All Blacks are going to be able to cause too many problems for Japan, and they're just not going to be able to get through the New Zealand defensive line to score enough tries to put really any pressure on this All Black team. So I'm suspecting the All Blacks are going to have their 8th win in a row against this Japan team. I think they're going to score at least 60 points. And I think Japan will struggle to get into the teens in this particular game. So I think Scott Robertson needs to be really careful with his selections against the Japanese, because whilst it seems to be a great opportunity to put in some of the younger players, I think he needs to go with nearly the team that he's going to play against England at Twickenham. I think we can't relax. These players have had 3 weeks off for playing for the All Blacks, and they need to make sure they're not rusty when they get to Twickenham to play England. They need to hit the ground running. Their combinations need to be working. Their defensive patterns need to be working. And there can be no area of complacency when it comes to taking on the English. So I think it's going to be really interesting next week to see Scott Robertson's selections against Japan. How many of these fringe players will he put in the team? And what impact is that going to have over the team that plays against England in a couple of weeks' time? Now, as always, as I ask you here on Inside Rugby with Mark, I'd love to hear your views and opinions on this. What do you think Scott Robertson needs to do as far as selections against Japan? Does he throw a whole lot of fringe players in there? Or does he just give people like Cam Roigard the opportunity to get back on the horse and to play a good solid game for the All Blacks? I'd love to hear your opinion. And then last time these two teams met, 38 points to 31 in favour of the All Blacks. What do you think is going to happen in this particular encounter? Do you think it's going to be a big blowout score like I'm predicting? Or do you think that Eddie Jones's Japanese team can run this All Black team close? I'd love to hear your views, so make sure you put them in the comments. I love watching the Brave Blossoms play, and I hope they do give the All Blacks a competitive game. But what I've seen so far throughout the Pacific Nations Cup, they are struggling in the forwards. And of course, in World Rugby today, to have any chance of getting some opposition pressure, you need to be able to compete in the forwards. And I think that's where this Japanese team is going to struggle against the All Blacks. So once the two teams are named next weekend, I will come out with a video talking about what I think is going to happen in more detail, looking at the position choices and also looking at some of the Japanese players and talking about them that you may not know too much about. So make sure you stick around on the channel for that one. So there you go. There are my thoughts around what I think is going to happen in Japan next weekend when the All Blacks start their first game in the Northern Hemisphere on this Northern Tour. I think it's going to be a comprehensive All Black win. I don't think this Japan team is going to be able to hang with this All Black team for very long at all. And I think we're going to see a little bit of touch rugby or super rugby played in Japan next weekend. Now, of course, I could be totally wrong. Japan play the game of their lives and give the All Blacks another fright. But let me know in the comments what you think is going to happen. And also let me know what you think about selections. Will Scott Robertson take the plunge and put in a number of new players? Or will he start a team that we're likely to see against England in a couple of weeks from now. I'd really like to hear your views on that one. Now, I'll be back again soon. There's plenty of rugby going on across the world. We have the Premiership, the URC, of course. We have the NPC semi-finals taking place in New Zealand this weekend. And of course, we've got some fantastic international rugby coming up. So if you're in line for some good analysis and discussions around that, pushing the opinions and thoughts of all rugby fans across the world, then stick with me here on Inside Rugby with Mark. We've got plenty of great content coming up. Until next time, stay safe, stay well, keep enjoying your rugby, everybody, and I'll see you again all very soon from beautiful Cancun in Mexico. Until next time, it's time to say adios from me.